Welcome back, Honors. All right, welcome to your first flip new decade. Oh my God, like it's insane. All right, so we're getting into a very intense semester, a super intense unit, which is going to be home to your very first straight up hardcore DBQ assignments and getting you ready for some really intense stuff. And also, congratulations, y'all have successfully caught the academic classes, right? Y'all have caught up to them. You're now in the same unit as they are, and you're going to end up catching them and passing them here pretty soon, which is really awesome. You guys should be super proud of yourselves. This is the fastest I've ever seen a group of honors girls ever, or honors children ever, go this quickly, and it's really impressive, and I'm super proud of y'all, all right? But we spent most of today, if not all of today, in class talking about the state of the world coming out of the late Middle Ages, right? So we talked about geographical areas that Europeans didn't even know existed. We talked about geographical areas that the Europeans could not pass through. We talked about geographical areas that were not friendly. We talked about blah, 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 blah. We got into all that stuff, and we set the stage for this unit, right? We really rigored it up a little bit, and we made sure that you understood the state of the world coming into right about 1400, all right, give or take. So this entire rest of the course is going to be focused mostly on the years of Western civilizations from 1500 and on, right? Now, some of y'all are probably immediately saying, well, wait a minute, Mr. Terry. I'm pretty confident that Martin Luther did most of his work after 1500. And to you, Allison, I would say you're right. He did, all right? But I like to talk about the Renaissance and the Reformation together because I think the ideas conjoin them. Whereas with the Age of Exploration, I kind of like to talk about it on its own because I think it's a groundbreakingly new development in economics and intensity, all right? So, first of all, but let's go ahead and get into it. What we're getting into now with this unit is known as the Age of European Exploration, all right? So, European exploration from about the years of 1450 to 1550, give or take, right? So, the thing, oh my gosh, this is making me so angry. It's like one little lump of hair right here. Now, the biggest thing about it is, remember, looking back, we had talked about this in class today. The Eastern world has been trading and making huge money since 500 AD, right? The Europeans were fully aware that the monsoon marketplace was happening, that the Arabs, the Africans, the Asians were making a lot of money in the Indian Ocean and were completely economically self-sufficient. They were having a golden age. They were doing great things, all right? So we know this, but eventually, to get to the state of Western civilization that we're in now, where we are fully quantified and globally integrated, economically speaking, and to get to this point in history, obviously the Europeans must have stepped it up a notch somewhere. That's what we're getting into. We're getting into where the Europeans came up to the monsoon marketplace and then passed by it, right? And then actually created globalized markets of their own. Okay, so the big thing about it is to make this all possible, you did have to have some new quote-unquote inventions, all right? So Europeans finally had stumbled across some really new, amazing inventions, right? Some things, some stuff that actually is going to give them the ability to try and navigate the seas, to try and find new trade routes to get to certain destinations so they can break into the monsoon marketplace themselves, right? So some of those inventions include things like the three things that are actually pictured down here. However, something that you need to understand is that they did not technically invent these things, right? These inventions were actually created by the Africans, the Asians, and the Arabs to actually make their intercoastal trading systems possible, right? But after trading with the Italians, which we talked about today in class, right? The Italians are then going to culturally diffuse these new devices into the rest of Europe, right? And other Europeans are going to finally catch on to them and start using them for themselves. One of the biggest ones is, first of all, cartography, also known as the science of map making, right? Cartography. Cartography, of course, uses several different tools to try and create these new lines that are going to go on these maps, known as latitude and longitude, so you can actually pinpoint and coordinate your position on the globe using the position of certain stars or the sun. So, sun is a star before Eli Omez punches me. All right, so now the biggest thing is using the positions of these different celestial bodies, you can now graph and chart where you are on the planet as if it were a coordinate plane. right? So that is a huge improvement. So the cartographical science of map making. Another big device that they actually use to make this thing possible, to make cartography possible, is another one that I want you to write down because you're my honors girls, all right? So it's called an astrolabe, which to me is one of the most important things in like the world. It's also a symbol of something to me that is very special, of like, you know, you're never going to lose your way, right? So this is an astrolabe, right? An astrolabe takes the position of the Polaris, right, or of the like one of the body of like one of the stars, and it measures the distance between that point and the horizon line, and that's how you figure out latitude or longitude where you're located on the Earth, depending on the degree of height that that body is from the horizon, right? So you would look down this little scope, and you would be able to tell exactly where you are, north or south of the equator, right? So it's a very, very important device known as an astrolabe, right? Go ahead and jot that one down as well. So you're going to have 4 inventions that you need to know. So cartography, astrolabes. Another big one is a fly compass or a compass, right? So fly compasses, though, are very important because a fly compass is where the disc moves independently, right? The disc moves independently, and the disc always points in what direction? North, right? It always points towards magnetic north. It was perfected by the Arabs, originally developed by the Asians, and then passed through, and as it passed through different hands, it became better and better. And by the time it ends up in Europe, it is now a perfected flying compass, right? That you can sit here and they're like, oh man, this thing, well, we know in my classroom north is this way, right? And so it will always continue to point that direction. Even if I turn around, now I know I'm heading south because this compass will always point north, right? So that is a huge development that the Europeans needed to be able to navigate the oceans, right? And then you also have triangular sailed ships. For the longest time, ever since the Minoans, when we talked about them in the Isles of Crete, they used square-sailed ships or rectangular-shaped, square-shaped sails, all right? So sails, all right, that make it so you can only travel only with the wind, right? Whereas triangular sailed ships, originally created by the Easterners, are going to make it so you can travel into the wind against it, right? You can now go both directions. So what is their motivation, though? Why is this so important? Why aren't they just okay with being all Middle Ages-like and boring and lame? Well, the biggest thing about it is motivation for exploring the seas is way up because life expectancy is going up. Quality of life is going up. The Black Plague is now over, and economies are now returning back to Europe again in full force, right? So demand for goods in Europe is high. Now, there are particular different goods that are going up in importance, right? Some of these goods include, jot these things down, silks, okay? Luxury goods, porcelain, tea is a huge one as well. But those are 4 important things. But then there's the 5th one, which is the gold star standard of all the products that were coming out of the East that everyone wanted and everyone thought was the best thing to have and the best thing to sell. And that is right here, spices, right? Spices are the most important out of those 5 products, but you do need to know all 5 products, right? The most valuable item out of all those products is spices, right? They're used to do a lot of different things other than just making your food taste better, right? So spices were used to preserve your food, flavor your food, make your medicines, even make your luxury items like perfumes, right? I always refer to one company that still has the phrase spice in their name, right? And remember, there you go, bang, Old Spice, right? Spices have been used for hundreds of years to make fragrances and perfumes and different other luxury goods as such. Now, the boat that's on the Old Spice logo is pretty close to a spice trading caravel. Not necessarily the exact one. It was modeled off of the USS Essex from 1799, which was a warship. But still, but it's known as Old Spice because, of course, Old Spice and spice is being used to make perfume. Oh. But it also has maritime connections, which I always use. And some of you are like, why do you have a stick of deodorant in your desk? Look, you gotta have a backup at all times, all right? So it's just good hygiene. Now, anyway, so we talked about this today heavily in class, right? If goods were making it from India or from China or from the Silk Road, the old school Silk Road, if they were making it from these original locations into Europe, they had to pass through a couple of sets of hands, right? They had to pass through Arab hands, particularly the Ottoman and the Persian Sunnis and Shiites, and then they also had to pass through Italian hands, right? Particularly the Venetian Italians, right? Even the Genoese try to like break into that market as well. So the Arabs and the Italian traders controlled the market because of their position on land in Europe, right? For the goods to make it from the eastern half of the world to Europe, it had to pass through those territories, right? So things got taxed and marked up, and the money was truly being made by Arabs and Italians. Hence why the Renaissance began in Italy, because the trade market ran through Italy, bringing a massive amount of funds in through Venice, the trade hub of Milan, and then the banking, financing, sector of Florence, right? Italy is the home to the Renaissance because of these early economic patterns, right? Because of the return of economics, because of the return of funds. But here's the thing, as time progresses and the Renaissance has already started, other Europeans want to now find their own direct route to Asia, and they want to start making money for themselves instead of having to pay marked up values for goods. Because think about it, if this right here is a spice that's coming from India, we're going to say it's black pepper, right? It's coming from India. It's got to now pass through Arab hands, which means they're going to mark the price up, and then they're going to pass it through Italian hands, which means they're going to mark the price up so they can make money, and then it's going to finally end up in the last destination where it is now more expensive, right? But European countries, two of them in particular, decide, no. I don't want my goods to go into this hand, and then into mine. I want to cut those middlemen out, and I want to bring it from the source to me, right? So, and they want to make more money off of it that way. Now, the big first European country to do this is going to be the Portuguese, right? So, the Portuguese. Portugal becomes the first European country to try and break into that trade market. And I have a map of Europe right here, and you better know where Portugal is. I'll give you a moment. Very good alley. That is impressive. Right there. That's Portugal, right? Right next door to Spain. Small hint of why they're going to get involved. Now, some of y'all are probably immediately asking, why Portugal? We haven't heard about them in, ever. All right, so this is true, all right? But the thing about Portugal is they were able and now financing direct initiatives to find these new routes, right? And they want to find a faster route to India so they can trade into the spice market. And it's all because of this guy, Henry the Navigator, right? So everybody called him Henry the Navigator, but what his real name is, the Duke of Viseu, also known as Prince Henry the Navigator, who is the central figure in the Portuguese Empire, the 15th century, during the 15th century, of course, the late 1400s. He is going to directly finance the Portuguese. Come on, give me a picture of him. Where's that goofy one with that stupid hat? There it is. All right, so now, Henry the Navigator, Prince Henry the Navigator, is going to be the direct financier of the first expeditions to try and find a faster route to India. Prince Henry the Navigator, you need to know him, right? And he's going to begin to finance all these things. He's going to start buying up caravels, these new triangular sailed ships. He's going to start buying up compasses and funding cartographical labs and making better maps. And he's going to decide it is up to us to try and find a faster route to get to these different areas. He also thought he was going to discover this guy, a guy named Prester John, which is this unknown Christian person we talked about him today in class about these unknown areas of Africa. But the biggest thing about Henry the Navigator is he wanted to try and discover the unknown parts of the world, right? And eventually he decides we got to find a faster route to India. So he starts sending out a lot of different envoys, right? He starts saying we need to map Africa, right? We need to map Africa so we can find out the different goods that are going in and out of there. So we can find these lost Christian communities, right, of Prester John and all these other people. We need to map out Africa so we can find trans-Saharan routes, even though they never actually made it to find a trans-Saharan route because nobody wants to go through the desert. But the Portuguese are going to map Africa, but they're going to map the coast of Africa, right? They're going to decide that they're going to have to go all the way around because they can't pass through the old Mongol Empire and they can't pass through the Arab Empire, which expands all the way into North Africa, right? So they have to go all the way around. So they map out Africa and attempt to find a faster route. And then they hit the southern tip of Africa, right? Now, before they ever got there, they discovered some really good stuff like the Azore Islands, right, Azore, which they find out is a very good place to grow sugarcane. That's one good that they find that they decide they're going to start selling. Sugar. All their big three goods all start with S. Sugar is one of them, coming out of certain islands that are off the coast of Africa. Slaves are the other one, coming directly out of Africa. And then spices is the third one, because they are eventually going to make it. But they did hit a big, big, big roadblock at the southern tip of Africa. A guy named Bartholomew Diaz tries to go all the way around Africa, but he hits this cape off the coast of Africa, which is very dangerously close to Antarctica, where a huge amount of storms come out of. And they called it the Cape of Storms, because Bartholomew Diaz is like, we can't make it past there. We got to turn around. We got to go back, right? So he turns around and goes back. But then eventually, a new sailor comes along. He's like, no, we're going to call it the Cape of Good Hope. Because if we can get past there, we've got a straight shot to India. And he was not wrong. And his name is Vasco da Gama, right? Vasco da Gama is going to be the very first person to lead a group of ships, 4 of them, all the way past the Cape of Good Hope, which is the southern tip of Africa, all the way past it, and all the way into India in 1497, right? So this is 5 years after Columbus discovers North and South America. So as you can see, they're in a direct race with another country to find a faster route to India. But the Portuguese strike first, right? They're the first ones to actually discover this route to India in 1497, and they find more spices than they know what to do with. And when I say they found it, the Indians already had it. They were already trading with some different Arab middlemen and people like that. But the thing about it is, the Portuguese have now found a faster route to it, because not only do they not have to go over mountains to get to them, but now they can go directly into ports at the base of India. And the thing about the earliest one is they ended up there's a lot of violence when they first got there. Vasco da Gama actually sent baskets of heads and hands to mayors of places like Calicut, a city in India, to try and show them, if you do not let us in to trade with your spices, we're going to send you this gift basket of your fishermen's body parts that are out here trying to fish off your coast. So they were directly killing people in the water. It's very aggressive. And forever after the Portuguese actually get into India, no one respects India all the way up until the 1900s. And India ends up passing through different European hands all over different markets and trade destinations within their country, right? So on the trip back, though, he is carrying a huge amount of spices, but more than half of his crew dies from a disease called scurvy, right? Scurvy is when you don't have enough vitamin C, and it ends up leading to different parts of your body degrading and deteriorating while you're still alive, right? Like your breath starts to stink, your teeth start to fall out, your hair gets so brittle, it'll snap off, right? So, however, he does make it all the way back, and he sells those spices for a ton of money. So after Vasco da Gama's voyage, the Portuguese have now made a trading empire all the way around Africa. I know that's a lot in the first day, but we're moving now, right? Second semester. But I hope y'all enjoyed it. I'll see y'all tomorrow.